They didn't call it a discovery at first. In the internal reports, the word used was anomaly. A harmless word. A word that suggested inconvenience rather than revelation. Something temporary. Something that would go away once the instruments were recalibrated and the equations corrected themselves out of embarrassment. I was the one assigned to verify it. That was my job at the Helios Deep Space Array. Verification. Confirmation. Making sure ghosts in the data stayed ghosts. I had spent 14 years learning how to tell the difference between signal and illusion, between something the universe was actually saying and something our machines merely wanted to hear. At 0211 Coordinated Universal Time, I was alone in Observation Bay C, watching the dark. The anomaly had first appeared during a routine gravitational lensing sweep. No alerts, no alarms. Just a faint distortion in a region of space that every model we had insisted should be empty. Not dark matter dense, not stellar debris, just vacuum and radiation and nothing worth naming, except it wasn't nothing. I remember leaning back in my chair, stretching my neck, feeling the familiar ache settle between my shoulders. Another night shift, another false positive. The system flagged dozens every week. Solar noise, microfluctuations, cosmic rays grazing a sensor at the wrong angle. Most of them vanished the moment you looked at them too closely. This one didn't. The distortion was stable. That alone should have been impossible. Gravitational lensing requires mass, and mass leaves fingerprints. It bends light. It alters background radiation. It announces itself to anyone patient enough to listen. But this mass didn't announce itself. It hid. I adjusted the filters manually, narrowing the bandpass, stripping away everything that could be explained by known physics. The distortion remained, clean and precise, like a silhouette cut out of reality. I felt the first flicker of unease then. Not fear, not yet. Just the quiet irritation of a scientist confronted with something that refused to behave. I ran the mass estimation algorithm 3 times. Each time, the result came back the same. Earth mass, Earth radius, Earth density curve. I laughed. Actually laughed. A short, humorless sound that echoed a little too loudly in the empty observation bay. The system had glitched. It had to have. Somewhere, a line of code had slipped, a decimal misplaced. I reset the process and rebuilt the model from scratch. Same result. The object sat directly opposite Earth's orbit, almost perfectly aligned behind the Sun, a theoretical position we called the L3 point. Gravitationally stable in equations, useless in practice. Anything placed there should have been detectable by its influence alone. This thing had been invisible, not hidden, not camouflaged, invisible. My fingers hovered over the console as the implications started stacking up faster than I could dismantle them. If the data was right, then this object had been there for a long time, decades at least, possibly longer, long enough to watch us without being seen. I pulled historical datasets, feeding them into the model. Old solar observations, archived telemetry, cosmic background surveys going back to the 70s. The system churned quietly, its processors whispering like insects behind the walls. The silhouette emerged retroactively. Once you knew where to look, it was everywhere. A subtle absence. A place where background radiation dipped just a fraction lower than it should have. A gravitational whisper drowned out by solar noise. The kind of thing no one would ever notice unless they were looking for it. Unless someone had wanted it that way. My mouth felt dry. I took a sip of coffee and immediately regretted it. It tasted burnt and stale, and suddenly insufficient for the moment. I flagged the anomaly for escalation. Protocol required that anything exceeding Class 4 deviation be reviewed by a secondary analyst. I expected a delay, paperwork, questions, skepticism. What I got instead was silence. 10 minutes passed, then 20. At 02:47, my console pinged with an override authorization I had never seen before. Black header. No departmental tag, no human name attached. Just a directive to route all incoming data to a secure partition and restrict access to my terminal only. My terminal, not the array, not the lab. Me. I should have reported that. I didn't. Curiosity is a polite word for disobedience, and I had built my career on it. I initiated high-resolution imaging using indirect methods. Reflected solar radiation, neutrino flux variations, everything short of direct optical observation. The system stitched together a composite model from incomplete information, guessing at shape and surface based on how the object interacted with the universe around it. The model stabilized, a sphere, blue and white. I stared at the rendering, my breath shallow, my heart doing something unpleasant in my chest. The system overlaid atmospheric composition estimates, nitrogen-oxygen dominant, trace carbon dioxide, water vapor, cloud cover. I whispered, no, to no one. The final overlay was the one that broke me. Topography. Continents resolved slowly, like a photograph developing in a chemical bath. Coastlines sharpened. Mountain ranges cast simulated shadows. Ocean basins darkened into familiar depths. It was Earth. Not similar to Earth. Not Earth-like. Earth. Africa. Eurasia. The Americas. Antarctica. Exactly where it belonged. Every curve of coastline burned into my memory from a lifetime of maps and screens. I stood up so fast, my chair toppled backward and clattered against the floor. I didn't notice. I couldn't stop staring. The model refined itself further without prompting, pulling in higher-order correlations. Artificial light signatures appeared on the night side. Cities, megastructures, transportation grids. But something was wrong. The lights were dim, sparse, fragmented. I zoomed in on what should have been the eastern seaboard of North America. The system hesitated, then rendered a region of darkness where New York should have been. No glow, no urban heat island, just scars in the land, long and irregular, like healed wounds. I felt a pressure building behind my eyes. I checked the atmospheric data again. Elevated particulates, ash signatures inconsistent with natural wildfires. Radiation levels slightly above baseline, but old. Decayed. This wasn't a living world. This was a world that had survived something. At 0312, my console locked itself. Every feed froze except one. A secure text channel opened, the cursor blinking patiently, as if whoever was on the other end knew I wasn't going anywhere. A message appeared. Dr. Elias Cade, you are not authorized to proceed further. I swallowed. My throat felt tight. I typed back before I could talk myself out of it. It's Earth. The response came almost instantly. Yes. I stared at the word, my pulse roaring in my ears. I typed again, hands shaking now. What happened to them? There was a pause, long enough for hope to flicker, long enough for me to imagine this was still salvageable, that there was an explanation that didn't involve the universe cracking open under the weight of its own secrets. When the reply came, it was longer. They fought. I closed my eyes. I already knew what the next question would be. I also knew I didn't want the answer. I typed it anyway. Who won? The cursor blinked, then stopped, and the last message appeared on my screen. Not humanity. The moment the message appeared, the air in Observation Bay C felt different. Not colder, not hotter, just occupied, as if the room had filled with an invisible presence that didn't need mass to be heavy. Not humanity. I read it 3 times, like repetition would soften it into something I could file under error or misinterpretation. My hands were still on the keyboard, but I couldn't remember placing them there. I was aware of my breathing in a way I usually wasn't, each inhale shallow, each exhale careful, as if a sudden movement might disturb whatever thin membrane separated my life before those words from whatever came after. I typed one more sentence. Who are you? No response. The secure channel remained open, cursor blinking like a heartbeat. I leaned closer to the monitor and watched the composite rendering of that other Earth rotating slowly in a black void. It looked normal from a distance, beautiful even. Blue ocean, white cloud cover, a planet pretending it hadn't bled. I did what scientists always do when they're terrified. I collected more data. The console lock prevented most direct commands, but it couldn't stop my mind from running through the physics. The atmosphere was breathable. The oceans were liquid. That alone meant the catastrophe, whatever it was, hadn't been complete. It had been selective. A war then. A war that scorched cities and left forests. A war that didn't crack the planet open. A war that ended with humanity losing. I stared at the night side again. Those dim, broken lights, like embers, like a campfire in a ruined world. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. Unknown number. I answered without speaking. "Dr. Cade," a woman said. Her voice was controlled, not calm. There's a difference. Calm is natural. Controlled is manufactured. "Yes," I said, and my own voice sounded wrong, too small for what was happening. "You need to leave the bay." I glanced around the empty room. "Who is this?" "My name doesn't matter. What matters is that you do exactly what I tell you next." I should have demanded credentials. I should have asked for authorization codes. I should have followed protocol. Instead, I said, "Okay." There was a pause, and I heard something in the background of the call. Not voices, not footsteps. A soft, constant hum, like air being pulled through a vent. "You will walk," she continued, "to corridor 7. You will not run. You will not speak to anyone. If you see security personnel approaching you, you will comply. You will not resist. You will not argue. Do you understand?" My throat tightened. "Am I in trouble?" "Trouble is a childish word," she said. "You are in proximity to a classified existential threat." Existential. That word is supposed to be used in think pieces and grim speeches, not whispered into your ear at 3 a.m. by a stranger who sounds like she hasn't slept in years. I swallowed. "Is the planet real?" "Yes." "Is it?" "Dr. Cade," she cut in, sharper now. "Your questions will be answered in the correct room, at the correct time, by the correct people. Leave the bay." My eyes drifted back to the monitor. The rendering continued rotating patiently. If it was real, then it had been there the whole time, sitting opposite our orbit like a twin you never knew you had, hidden behind the sun, watching the light from our world and not returning any of its own. I stood, legs stiff, and stepped around my overturned chair. As I crossed the bay, the secure channel on my console updated without my input. A single line appeared. "Do not tell them you saw the scars." My stomach dropped. I stopped walking. The woman on the phone went silent, listening, like she knew I had paused. "How?" I began. "Keep moving," she said, and the control in her voice cracked just enough to reveal something underneath. Fear. Pure and tired. I walked. The corridor outside was brighter than the bay, fluorescent panels washing everything in sterile light. The Helios array at night is usually quiet, a cathedral built for machines and sleepless people. But this time, it felt staged. Doors were closed that were usually open. Intersections that usually held a bored technician or two were empty. As I approached Corridor 7, I saw security. 2 men in black uniforms, no department insignia. Not Helios security, not private contractors. Military posture without the courtesy of military identification. They didn't raise weapons. They didn't speak. One of them simply nodded toward a door I'd never entered before. A door that had always been there and yet never mattered, like a part of the building designed to be ignored by everyone except the day it wasn't. The woman on the phone said, "Hang up." I did. The door opened with a soft seal release, and the air beyond was colder, dry, filtered. Inside was a briefing room with no windows, a steel table bolted to the floor, and a wall-sized display panel currently dark. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and ozone, like electronics running too hot. 4 people waited for me. 2 were in suits. 1 wore a white lab coat. The last wore a plain grey uniform with no rank markings, and eyes that looked like they'd seen things that made sleep optional. The uniformed woman stood first. "Dr. Elias Cade," she said. "I'm Director Havel. You will refer to me as Director." "Director of what?" I asked, and hated how thin my voice sounded. "Of the problem you just found." The lab coat, a man, late 50s, hair clipped close, watched me like I was a specimen that might break if handled poorly. Director Havel gestured to the chair at the far end of the table. "Sit." I sat. No one offered water. No one offered reassurance. They didn't do small kindnesses in rooms like this. Director Havel tapped a control on the table. The wall display flickered to life, showing a static image of the twin Earth composite. Same blue, same clouds, same continents. In here, under harsh lighting, it looked less like a miracle and more like evidence. "You were not supposed to see it," she said. "That's a hard thing to accidentally not see," I replied before I could stop myself. One of the suited men shifted, displeased. The other didn't move at all. Director Havel ignored my tone. "This object has been designated Mirror Earth, classified Omega Black. Detection is restricted to a handful of observatories worldwide, each monitored through black budget oversight." I stared at her. "You're telling me you already knew it was there?" "We knew something was there," she corrected. "We did not know you would map it this quickly." The lab coat man finally spoke. "Your model is elegant, dangerous. You collapsed uncertainty too fast." I frowned. "Collapsed uncertainty?" He nodded once, like it was a term everyone used casually. "Some phenomena remain stable only while unobserved at a certain resolution. Once you resolve them, you lock them into a state." My skin prickled. "Are you saying the planet was not fully real until we looked?" Director Havel's eyes never blinked. "The planet was real enough to bury." She changed the display. The image zoomed to the far side of the twin Earth. Nighttime. The faint city lights, broken into scattered constellations. Then she overlaid a timeline. Dates, decades, a slow decline. The lights dimmed year by year, not abruptly, but in a pattern that looked like a dying heartbeat. The lab coat man pointed at the curve. "It wasn't a single catastrophe. It was attrition. War," I whispered. Director Havel's gaze sharpened. "Yes." The suited man on her right slid a folder across the table toward me. It was thick, old-fashioned paper, stamped repeatedly with classifications I couldn't even pass. I didn't open it yet. "With who?" The uniformed woman hesitated, just slightly, enough that I noticed. Then she said, "An ancient species." The words should have been dramatic. They weren't. They were delivered the way someone says mold or radiation leak. A hazard category, a problem to contain. I finally opened the folder. Inside were images, not photographs, renders, reconstructions, signal translations, pages of dense analysis, diagrams of orbital mechanics and energy signatures. Then I saw a page labeled Last Transmission, Mirror Earth, Year Unknown. It wasn't text, it was a waveform, and beneath it, a single translated sentence typed in stark black letters. "We did not lose because we were weaker. We lost because we were seen." My mouth went dry. I looked up at Director Havel. "You have communications from them." "Fragments," she said. "Some intentional, some incidental. And you've been sitting on this." Her expression didn't change. "We've been surviving it." The lab coat man leaned forward. His voice lowered, as if the room itself might be listening. "Dr. Cade," he said, "the greatest danger is not that Mirror Earth exists. The danger is that it is a record." "A record of what?" I asked, though I already knew. Director Havel clicked the display again. New image. A region of Mirror Earth's upper atmosphere, filled with faint geometric patterns, barely visible, like the afterimage of something enormous that had once been there. She spoke quietly now. A record of first contact. I stared at the patterns and felt my mind trying to refuse them. Geometry that didn't belong to weather, shapes too deliberate to be natural. What am I looking at? I managed. Director Havel said, "A footprint." My hands tightened on the folder. "Of the species?" "Yes." "And where are they now?" This time, Director Havel didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was the flattest thing in the room. "We don't know." I exhaled shakily. "Then why call me in here? Why let me see any of this?" Director Havel looked at me as if I had asked why gravity existed. "Because," she said, "you were the first one to map the scars." My blood ran cold. I remembered the message on my console. "Do not tell them you saw the scars." I forced my voice steady. "What scars?" For the first time, Director Havel smiled. It wasn't kind, it was confirmation. She tapped the display, zooming in on a section of landmass that should have been coastline and wasn't. A long, jagged line running inland, like a wound that had split the continent. Then she said the sentence that made every hair on my arms lift. "We believe they didn't just kill Mirror Earth's humanity," she said. "We believe they marked them." I stared at the line on the screen, at the unnatural precision of it, at how it looked less like destruction and more like writing. Then Director Havel added softly, "And now you've marked us back." For a few seconds after Director Havel said it, nobody moved. Not the men in suits, not the lab coat, not the two silent security guards by the door, not even me. The room felt sealed tighter than a submarine, pressure building with every heartbeat. I stared at the jagged line on the screen, the scar carved across what should have been familiar coastline. It wasn't random devastation. It had edges, intention, like someone had dragged a blade across a map and left a message too large for a human mind to read at once. Director Havel turned off the display. The sudden darkness was worse. "In the last 48 hours," she said, "we have initiated emergency protocols across every participating observatory. Your array is the only one that resolved Mirror Earth beyond acceptable thresholds." I forced air into my lungs. Acceptable thresholds. The lab coat man, Dr. Sato, I finally noticed his name tag, folded his hands. "It's not a moral term, it's a survival term." I stared at him. "You're telling me there's a level of truth that gets people killed?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Director Havel slid another folder out of the stack and opened it herself, turning it so I could see. It wasn't a report, it was a timeline of disappearances, decommissions, accidents, names and dates, researchers who died in single car crashes, analysts found unresponsive at their desks, entire labs shut down after budget reviews. The pattern wasn't subtle. The universe didn't need to be. I felt my tongue stick to the roof of my mouth. "You're blaming them?" "We're stating correlation," Director Havel said. "We're past blame." Dr. Sato leaned forward slightly, as if he needed me closer to hear the next part, even though the room was empty of windows and microphones, at least the kind I could see. "The scars you mapped," he said, "are not damage." I blinked. "Then what are they?" "Compression artifacts," he replied, like that was supposed to help. "A byproduct of a process. Imagine a storm seen from orbit. The storm is not the point. The pattern is the signature of the engine that made it." Director Havel switched the screen back on. A new image appeared, not of Earth, but of numbers. Vast arrays of them, spectral readouts, energy distributions. She highlighted one set with a red box. "This," she said, "is the atmospheric particulate signature after Mirror Earth's war." I leaned in despite myself. The data looked like ash and radiation, the leftovers of cities burned and weapons deployed. Then she clicked again. A second signature appeared beside it. Similar. Not identical, but close enough that my stomach tightened on instinct. Director Havel spoke softly. "This is Earth." My heart gave a hard, ugly thump. "That's impossible," I said. We haven't had a global war," one of the suited men interrupted. His voice was calm, rehearsed. "We haven't had extinction-level bombardment. We haven't lost." He paused just long enough for the sentence to twist. "Yet." Director Havel pointed at the curve. "The similarity isn't from war. It's from observation." I stared at her. "You're saying our atmosphere is changing because we looked at them?" Dr. Sato nodded. "Not the act of looking, the act of resolving. When your model crossed a threshold, Mirror Earth's state became entangled with ours." I felt a cold sweat gather at the base of my spine. "Entangled," Dr. Sato continued, tone gentle now, like you'd use on someone who might panic and do something stupid. Mirror Earth has always been there, but it was blurred, unfixed, like an object in your peripheral vision. You can sense it, but you can't describe it precisely. The moment you describe it precisely, you force it into a specific reality. "And that affects us," I said. "It affects what is connected," he replied. "And something is connected." Director Havel changed the display again. The scar reappeared, now overlaid with faint vector lines. She traced them with a stylus, drawing attention to the geometry I'd felt in my gut from the start. The line wasn't just a wound, it was part of a larger pattern, a symbol too large to see without distance. "What does it mean?" I asked. The question hung in the air, childish and desperate. Director Havel answered anyway. "We don't know, but we've seen it before." She clicked. A new image appeared. A grainy satellite photo of an oceanic region on our Earth. Clouds, water, nothing special. Until she increased contrast, and the same jagged geometry emerged faintly beneath the surface, like a shadow pressed into the world itself. My throat tightened. "That's here." "It's been here," she corrected. She pulled up another image, then another, different parts of the planet. Arctic ice, desert basins, dense jungle canopy, each time faint geometry, each time the same signature like a watermark embedded in the earth. My hands curled into fists. "How long?" Director Havel's gaze didn't waver. "Longer than recorded history," she said. The suited man spoke again, voice low. "There are myths that describe it, religions that build stories around it, symbols carved into temples by people who had no way of seeing from orbit, yet somehow reproduced the pattern." I felt my pulse in my jaw. "So they've been here the whole time?" Dr. Sato tilted his head. "Define here." I swallowed hard. "On Earth." "Near Earth," he corrected. "Adjacent to Earth. Folded into the same phase space. The species we're discussing doesn't travel the way we do. It doesn't cross distance. It crosses state." My mind rebelled. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to stand up and walk out and pretend I'd never seen any of this. But my body stayed, planted in the chair like the bolts in the floor had reached up and fused with my bones. Director Havel slid a thin tablet across to me. "Listen," she said. On the screen was an audio waveform, jagged and uneven. Beneath it was a timestamp. Mirror Earth. Last transmission. Fragment. 7. I hesitated. "Is it human?" Dr. Sato answered. "It was sent by humans, but it's not meant for humans." I tapped play. At first, it sounded like static, thin, crackling noise layered with low-frequency pulses. Then the translator software engaged, stripping out interference and converting the signal into something approximating language. A voice came through. It was human in the way a photograph of a dead person is human. Familiar shape, wrong presence. Male, maybe. Strained. Breathing hard, as if recording while running. "If you're hearing this, it means you found us, which means you did what we did. which means you are about to learn the same lesson. The voice paused, swallowing, and I heard something behind it. A distant rumble, not an explosion, something larger, slower, like the world itself groaning. We thought first contact would look like ships, lights in the sky, a radio exchange. We thought we'd have time to decide what kind of species we wanted to be. A brittle laugh. Broken. We were arrogant enough to believe we would get to decide. The rumble in the background grew louder. The voice dropped to a whisper. They don't come from space. They come from your certainty, from your maps, from your predictions. They come when you think you understand. I felt my skin crawl. The words weren't just a warning. They felt like a confession of failure. They didn't attack our cities first, the voice continued. They attacked our models. They turned our science into a door. My grip tightened on the tablet. What does that mean? I whispered, even though the recording couldn't answer. The voice on the signal did. We tried to fight them with missiles, with nukes, with everything we had. We destroyed our own oceans trying to poison the sky, to blind them. It didn't matter. The rumble swelled again. Something metallic scraped in the far background. Not a machine, not a vehicle. More like the sound of something immense shifting against itself. The voice became frantic. Listen to me. You're not being invaded. You're being selected. Static tore through the signal, tearing the words into fragments. The translator struggled to keep up. They don't need to land. They don't need to breathe. They don't need us dead. The voice returned for one last coherent burst, desperate and urgent, as if the speaker had reached the end of a corridor and found nothing but a wall. You cannot win by fighting. We tried. We proved it. The only victory is to remain. The signal cracked. The rumble became a deep, trembling roar that made my teeth vibrate even through a recording. The voice shouted one final sentence. Unseen! Then the transmission ended. Silence filled the room again, heavier than before. My hands were shaking. I set the tablet down carefully, like it might explode if I moved too fast. Director Havel watched me, expression unreadable. That, she said, is why this is classified Omega Black. I swallowed. They're telling us to stop observing. Dr. Sato nodded. Stop resolving. Stop defining. And if we don't? I asked. Director Havel turned the screen back on. This time it showed our own solar system model. Earth highlighted. Mirror Earth plotted opposite, hidden behind the sun. Between them, a faint line appeared. Not a physical tether, a statistical correlation line, like a connection drawn by math itself. Director Havel tapped the line. It strengthens, she said, every time we look. I stared at the connection, at the thin thread that felt like a noose. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest since the first message on my console. What happens when it becomes strong enough? Director Havel didn't answer with words. She answered by showing me a new file, a scan of my console log. Timestamped 3.12. The line I'd seen before. Do not tell them you saw the scars. I felt my blood drain from my face. Director Havel spoke very softly now. Dr. Cade, that message did not come from our systems. I stared at the text until the letters blurred. If it didn't come from you, I whispered, then who? Dr. Sato finished the thought for me, voice barely audible. Either a human on Mirror Earth who still has access to something we don't, he paused, or the thing that marked them. After Director Havel said the message didn't come from their systems, the room fell into a silence so complete I could hear the faint, rhythmic click of the air vents cycling. It wasn't soothing, it sounded like counting, like a machine marking time until something reached a threshold and became irreversible. I kept staring at the console log on the screen, the same sentence I remembered, the same timestamp, the same impossible implication. Do not tell them you saw the scars. I forced myself to look away from it and up at Director Havel, because if I kept staring at that line, I'd start believing it was speaking directly to me again. "You're saying," I began, slow, careful, "that something outside your network communicated with me through your secure channel?" Director Havel didn't blink. "Yes. That's not..." I stopped, because "not possible" had died on my tongue 3 hours ago. "How?" Dr. Sato answered instead of her. "We have theories." "Like what?" He hesitated, then seemed to decide I'd already crossed too many lines for gentle treatment. "Mirror Earth isn't merely hidden behind the sun," he said. "It's hidden behind an information barrier, a structure in probability space. Think of it as a blind spot engineered into reality. We only detect it because our instruments are now sensitive enough to notice the edge of that blind spot." I stared at him. Engineered? By who? No one answered immediately. Director Havel finally said, "By the same entity that benefited from it." The suited man on her left, his lapel pin was blank, which was somehow more unsettling than any agency logo, leaned forward. "We call them the archivists," he said. The word landed wrong. Too domestic, too human, like giving a name to a hurricane. "The archivists," I repeated, tasting it. "That's your best label." "It isn't a name," he said. "It's a function." Director Havel turned the display to a new file, a page of symbols, curves, and geometric intersections that made my eyes hurt to follow. It looked like someone had tried to draw language using gravity and failed. "This is the closest we've gotten to their writing," she said. I leaned in. "From Mirror Earth?" "From both," she replied. "From Mirror Earth's scars, and from anomalous patterns found across our own planet." My chest tightened. "So the watermark patterns on Earth are the same language?" Dr. Sato nodded. "Same syntax, same structure, different medium." I sat back and tried to force my mind into order. "You said Mirror Earth is a record, a first contact." Director Havel's eyes met mine like a door locking. "Yes." "And the transmission said the only victory is to remain unseen," I continued. "So why show me anything?" The suited man answered, voice flat. "Because you already saw it." Director Havel's fingers tapped the table once, a sigh, small impatience. "We don't have the luxury of pretending the threshold wasn't crossed. Your mapping event changed the entanglement strength between the two Earths. We're now in a new phase of the problem." The phrase "new phase" made my stomach lurch because it implied there had been older ones. That this wasn't the beginning. It was a page turn. I tried to keep my voice steady. "What phase were you in before tonight?" Director Havel didn't answer with a number. She answered with an image. The display switched to a timeline, a century-long line of detected anomalies. Each one small, each one dismissed publicly, each one classified privately. I saw dates, locations, events that suddenly weren't random anymore. The lab coat man, Sato, pointed at a cluster in the late 1970s. First detection attempts, low resolution, no confirmation. A second cluster in the mid-1990s. Satellite era, better coverage, still inconclusive. Then another cluster about 10 years ago. Deep field correlation, gravitational inference, the blind spot became measurable. He looked at me. "And then you," he said. My mouth went dry. "So I'm the problem." Director Havel's tone softened by a fraction, which somehow made it worse. "You're a catalyst." I stared at the table, at my own hands. They didn't feel like mine anymore. They felt like evidence. "What happens now?" I asked. Director Havel didn't hesitate. "Now we decide whether to close the door," she said, "or whether we've already opened it too far." I swallowed. "What door?" Dr. Sato leaned forward again. He spoke with careful precision, like explaining something to a child who might touch a live wire. "Observation is not passive," he said. "At extreme precision, it becomes interaction. Your model didn't simply see Mirror Earth. It extracted structure from it. It imposed definition. So it's like I searched for something grounding, something I could hold. Like radar. If you ping something, it knows you're there. Sato nodded. In principle. The suited man added, except radar pings travel through space. This travels through probability, through the underlying rules that decide what is real and what is not. I felt myself starting to shake again, subtle tremors in my legs. If they exist through probability, how do you fight them? Director Havel gave me a look that wasn't pity exactly. It was the look you give someone asking how to punch an eclipse. You don't, she said. Mirror Earth tried. They turned their oceans into chemical weapons. They set their skies on fire. They detonated enough nuclear material to alter their own biosphere. She clicked to another image. It was Mirror Earth's atmosphere profile again, but this time it included a note. A sharp drop in aerosol particulates at a specific year. Their final strategy was to blind themselves, Director B.E. Havel said, to erase their own technological signature, to go dark. And it didn't work, I whispered. Sato's voice was quieter now. It worked temporarily. My head snapped up. Temporarily? Director Havel's finger traced the curve. Look at the end. I leaned toward the display and my blood iced over. The curve didn't end. It dipped, and then began rising again. Not from industry, not from human activity, from something else. A new signature, slow and steady, like a process reactivating after a pause. They came back, I breathed. Director Havel nodded once, or they never left. The suited man on the left spoke, eyes cold. Mirror Earth's last coherent transmissions stopped shortly after that inflection point. I tried to speak and failed. My tongue felt numb. Director Havel continued. We believe Mirror Earth didn't simply suffer invasion. We believe it was used as a proving ground. A proving ground for what? I managed. Her voice was very flat again. For the method. I stared at her. What method? Sato took over, and his words were careful, like he hated them. The archivists do not conquer worlds for territory, he said. They don't strip mine planets. They don't enslave populations in any recognizable way. They alter the relationship between intelligence and reality. I felt something cold open inside my chest. Meaning? He looked at me as if weighing whether I could carry it. Then he said, they weaponize understanding. The words made my scalp prickle. Director Havel clicked the display to a new file. A diagram of observation thresholds, marked by ascending levels. At the top was a label. Phase 4, reciprocity below. It was a warning. When observed system observes back. My throat tightened. We're in phase 4. Yes, Director Havel said. I forced myself to ask the next question. What happens in phase 5? Director Havel's face didn't change, but the room did. The suited men went still in a way that wasn't normal. The security guards by the door shifted their weight, hands closer to where weapons would be, even though none were visible. Sato spoke instead, voice barely above a whisper. Phase 5 is contact, he said. I stared at the diagram until the lines blurred. Then why aren't we dead already? I asked. If contact is inevitable, why delay? Why hide behind a blind spot at all? Director Havel's eyes held mine. Because selection isn't instantaneous, she said. They sample, they test, they wait for a system to become measurable. She pointed to the phrase reciprocity. You don't hunt what you can't track, she said, and you can't track what hasn't defined itself. My mouth felt full of sand. So when we define Mirror Earth, we define ourselves. Yes, Director Havel said. I thought of the warning in the transmission. The only victory is to remain unseen. I looked at Director Havel. Then the correct move is to stop. She nodded slowly. That would be the correct move if stopping were possible. I frowned. What do you mean? Dr. Sato pressed a button on his tablet. The wall display changed to a live feed from the Helios array control systems. A graph labeled entanglement, coherence, flickered across the screen. It was climbing. Not rapidly, not explosively, steadily, like a tide. I stared at it, confused at first, then horrified as the obvious punched through my denial. "We're not observing right now," I said. "Your system is locked. I'm not running any scans. So why is it increasing?" Dr. Sato's expression tightened. "Because observation is not only mechanical," he said. I felt my stomach drop. "You mean, you saw it," he said. "You mapped it. You conceptualized it. Now it exists in your mind at a resolution it did not exist before. And minds are part of the system." The room tilted slightly, like my balance had suddenly become theoretical. "You're saying," I whispered, "that I'm keeping the connection alive by remembering it?" Director Havel's gaze stayed fixed on mine. "Yes," she said. "And not just you." She clicked again. A new feed appeared. Social media anomaly monitoring, keyword scanners, suppressed leak trackers. A list of flagged phrases, auto-scrubbed across platforms in real time. Mirror Earth. Twin Earth behind the sun. L3 Earth. Second Earth hidden. Shadow planet. My blood ran cold. "Someone else knows," I said. Director Havel's voice sharpened. "Someone else is talking." The suited man spoke in a low, urgent tone. "We contained the main systems, but your initial flag was routed through standard channels for 90 seconds before the override hit. 90 seconds is enough." I stared at the rising coherence graph. "Enough for what?" Director Havel answered quietly. "Enough for the universe to notice we noticed," she said. I opened my mouth to speak, but my phone buzzed again in my pocket. Unknown number. The room went very still as I pulled it out. Director Havel's eyes narrowed. "Do not answer that." My hand hovered anyway, shaking, because I recognized the timing. Uru 247, I'd been called by a woman whose name didn't matter. And now, at 0358, my phone rang again like a bell repeating a pattern. The screen flashed once. Then the phone displayed text without an incoming call ID, without a number, without any normal interface. Just a single sentence. "You should have listened." My breath caught. And the display on the wall, every feed, every chart, glitched at once, smearing into a single frame of impossible geometry. For less than a second, I saw it. Not the scars on Mirror Earth, not the watermark on ours, something between them, a shape like a doorway made of math, opening where no space existed. Then the feeds snapped back to normal. Director Havel stood so fast, her chair screeched. "Shut the array down," she barked. One of the suited men was already moving. "It's already down." Dr. Sato's voice was tight, strained. "Not the array. Us." I looked up at him. "What do you mean, us?" I whispered. He didn't answer, because the coherence graph on the wall reached a marked line and changed color from white to red. A label appeared that hadn't been there before. Phase 5, initiated, and beneath it, in the same blunt typography as the message on my console, reciprocal observation confirmed. Nobody spoke after the wall display turned red. The room didn't explode into panic the way movies teach you panic looks. No screaming, no running, no dramatic collapse. Just a sudden, shared stillness, like everyone's nervous system had agreed that movement might make the universe notice us harder. Phase 5. Initiated. I stared at the words until they stopped being letters and became a physical sensation, a weight pressing on the inside of my skull. Director Havel's hands were flat on the table, knuckles pale. The two suited men stood near the door now, not blocking it exactly, but occupying the space in a way that suggested leaving was a privilege that could be revoked without discussion. Dr. Sato didn't move at all. He watched the coherence graph like a man watching an approaching storm through a window he couldn't close. "What does reciprocal observation look like?" I asked, and hated how calm my voice sounded. It didn't feel like mine. Sato's lips parted, then closed again. He chose Director Havel to answer for him, like some truths were too sharp to touch directly. Director Havel didn't look away from the screen. "It looks like the system returns definition," she said. I frowned. Returns definition. She finally turned her head toward me. Her eyes were bloodshot with exhaustion, but focused, razor clear. "We defined Mirror Earth," she said. "Now something is defining us." The thought landed wrong in my mind, like a puzzle piece forced into the wrong slot. Defining us? By what metrics? Coordinates, atmosphere, cities, species? Then my memory threw up a detail like a body surfacing in black water. The warning on my console. "Do not tell them you saw the scars." It hadn't said, "Do not map the planet." It hadn't said, "Do not observe." It had specified the scars, the writing, the watermark. As if the planet itself was less dangerous than the meaning embedded into it. My phone was still in my hand. The sentence on its screen, "You should have listened," glared back at me like an accusation. I held it up. "Is this part of Phase 5? I asked. Director Havel's eyes narrowed. "That device should not be receiving anything." "It is," I said, voice rising despite my effort. "So either your secure facility is compromised, or it's not your phone anymore," Sato murmured. I looked at him. He didn't flinch. "If the system is observing back," he said, "it will use channels you already trust. Your senses, your devices, your language." A cold flush crawled up my neck. "So it can talk." The suited man with the blank lapel pin answered. "It can reflect." "Reflect what?" I demanded. He didn't answer directly. "You've heard of mimicry in nature," he said. "Predators that look like harmless insects. Flowers that look like rotting meat. The point isn't deception for its own sake. The point is to exploit the observer's assumptions." Director Havel turned back to the wall display and tapped a control. The coherence graph minimized. A new feed took its place. Live sensor diagnostics from Helios Bay C, my bay. A camera feed showed the empty observation room, my chair still overturned, the console dark. Nothing moved, no shadow, no intruder. Then a new overlay appeared. Internal system logs, streaming faster than a human could read. Error after error, each one stamped with an origin point that made my stomach tighten. Origin. Unknown. "That's impossible," I whispered. Sato's voice was flat. So was Mirror Earth. Director Havel's fingers moved again. "Bring up the return signal," she ordered. The suited man complied, and the wall filled with a waveform I didn't recognize. It wasn't random noise. It had structure, repetition, a cadence that wasn't sound, but could be rendered as sound if you forced it into the human range. I felt my teeth ache, like my body was reacting to something my ears couldn't even hear. Sato leaned in. "That's not a transmission," he said. "It's a measurement." "A measurement of what?" I asked. Director Havel spoke quietly. "Of us." The waveform shifted, not because someone pressed a button, not because a technician adjusted a setting. It shifted the way a living thing shifts when it notices movement. The suited men stiffened. One of the security guards at the door moved his hand toward his belt, then stopped as if remembering weapons were meaningless against math. A new line of text appeared beneath the waveform, auto-generated by the translation software. "Attempting semantic alignment." Sato's jaw clenched. "We didn't initiate that." Director Havel's voice sharpened. "Shut it off." The suited man reached for the control, but before his fingers touched it, the display changed again. The waveform flattened into a clean, precise pattern. Then the screen filled with a single sentence in English, typed in the same stark font as the earlier messages. "Hello, Elias." My breath stopped. Every head in the room turned toward me. I stared at the words as if my refusal could erase them. My name, not humanity, not Earth, not observer. Elias. Me. "That's not possible," I said, but my voice broke. I didn't." Sato spoke, like he was afraid to say the wrong thing aloud. "Your name is in the system," he said. "Your personnel file, your ID logs, your voice print in the building. It doesn't need to know you the way a person knows you. It needs to identify the highest resolution node in the network." Director Havel stared at the screen as if it offended her. "It's anchoring to you." My hands were trembling so hard the phone nearly slipped from my grip. "Why me?" Nobody answered, because the screen updated again before they could. "You looked through the mirror." I swallowed. "Mirror Earth." The suited man hissed, under his breath, a warning without words. Director Havel's gaze snapped to me. "Do not respond." I stared at her. "It's already talking to me." "That doesn't mean you speak back," she said. But the impulse was there, deep and stupid and human. The instinct that if something addresses you, you answer. That language is a bridge, not a weapon. That communication is safer than silence. Mirror Earth's last transmission had called that instinct arrogant. We thought we'd have time to decide what kind of species we wanted to be. We were arrogant enough to believe we would get to decide. My throat tightened. I forced my eyes away from the screen. Then my phone vibrated again. Not a buzz, not a ring. A vibration pattern like Morse code tapping directly into my palm. I looked down despite myself. My phone screen was blank now, but the vibration continued, rhythmic, insistent. Sato noticed. "Put it down," he said, too fast. "Now." I didn't. Because my phone wasn't just vibrating. It was warm. Not the warmth of a battery, the warmth of skin. I dropped it like it had bitten me. It hit the floor with a dull slap and slid under the table. The vibration stopped immediately, as if it had only needed to touch me once. Director Havel's voice was low and furious. "We are not going to repeat Mirror Earth's mistakes." Sato's eyes were on the screen. "We may already be." The wall display updated again without anyone touching it. The sentence, "Hello," Elias vanished. The waveform returned for a moment, then resolved into something else. An image, not of Mirror Earth, not of Earth, of the briefing room. Us. It wasn't a camera feed. The angle was wrong, too high, too wide, as if the room had been flattened into a diagram and then rendered back into 3 dimensions. The lighting was off, the corners too sharp, the edges too clean. It looked like a model, the way my composite rendering of Mirror Earth had looked before it became undeniable. A mapping, a definition. My skin crawled as I watched my own figure on the screen, seated, shoulders tight, head turned slightly toward Director Havel. The image sharpened. My face became clearer than any security camera could manage. Then the image zoomed in, focusing on my eyes with an intimacy that felt obscene. A new line of text appeared. "We see you." Director Havel stood rigid. "Kill the power," she snapped. One of the suited men lunged toward the wall control panel. His hand slapped the emergency cutoff. The screen went black. The room lights flickered once, then steadied. For half a second, relief surged through me. An animal response, the belief that darkness equals safety. Then my own reflection in the black screen moved. Not the real reflection, the one that should have mirrored us. This one moved with a delay, like a bad video call, like a different version of the room lagging behind reality. I heard a small sound escape, someone's throat, one of the security guards maybe. A strangled inhale. My reflection, my shadow in the dead screen, tilted its head. I hadn't. It stared directly at me. Then, in the black glass of the powered-down display, words appeared again, faint at first, then brightening, as if lit from behind. Not printed, not typed, etched, like scratches forming in real time. "You cannot unsee." My mouth went numb. Director Havel backed away from the wall, slow and controlled, like sudden motion might encourage whatever this was to become more solid. Sato's voice shook for the first time. "It's using the display as a surface," he whispered, "not as a device." The blank lapel suited man spoke, voice tight. "It doesn't need our electricity." Director Havel's eyes were locked on the words. "Then we do what Mirror Earth tried," she said. I looked at her. "Blind ourselves." She didn't answer me. She addressed the room like issuing orders to a sinking ship. "Total blackout protocol," she said. "Cut external networks, cut satellite links, cut all observational assets. We go dark." One of the suited men hesitated. "Director, if we go dark now, we lose control either way," she snapped. "But if there's a chance remaining unseen slows it." The black screen flickered again. The etched words vanished. For a heartbeat, I thought it was over. Then a new sentence carved itself into the dark surface. Slower this time, deliberate, like a hand writing with a knife. "Too late." The room fell silent again. I realized, with a sick clarity, that Phase 5 wasn't contact in the way we'd imagined. It wasn't ships or lights in the sky. It was an intimate invasion of definition, a presence that didn't need to arrive because it had always been adjacent, waiting for us to describe the door accurately enough to open it for ourselves. And the worst part was the simplest. It knew my name. They moved fast after too late. Not frantic fast, not clumsy fast. The kind of practice speed that comes from having run disaster drills so many times they become muscle memory. That terrified me more than panic would have. Panic means you didn't expect this. Practice means you did. Director Havel barked orders into the room without raising her voice. The suited men split their attention between devices I hadn't noticed, and the door, as if expecting it to open inward under its own will. One of the security guards pressed his palm to a wall panel near the exit, and a faint chime answered him, followed by a low mechanical hum. Somewhere deep in the facility, systems began to die on command. The fluorescent lights overhead dimmed by a fraction, then steadied. The air vents changed pitch. The building shifted into a different mode of existence, like a living thing holding its breath. Total blackout protocol initiated. A synthetic voice announced from a speaker I couldn't locate. It didn't sound like a public address system. It sounded like a machine reading a death certificate. External communications severed. Observational assets entering safe state. I kept staring at the powered-down wall display. Even black, it felt like a window now, like glass that had been touched from the other side and could never be trusted again. "You can't cut what isn't a signal," Sato murmured. He spoke mostly to himself. "You can't unplug a concept." Director Havel's eyes stayed on the dark screen. "You can stop feeding it," she said. The blank lapel man shook his head once, slow. "We already fed it. We built it a map." His gaze slid to me like a blade. I hated that it made sense. The moment I resolved Mirror Earth, I had done more than observe. I had produced a structure, a model, a bridge of certainty. I had taken something blurred and made it sharp. Then it had returned the favor. I wanted to apologize. The impulse rose in me like nausea, that human instinct to say sorry when something is broken even if you didn't mean to break it. But I didn't know who I would be apologizing to. Director Havel finally tore her eyes from the screen and looked at me. "You need to come with us," she said. "Where?" I asked. "Containment wing," she replied. The word hit me like a physical shove. "Containment?" I repeated, like I'm contaminated. Havel didn't soften it. "Like you're the highest resolution point of contact." Sato flinched, just slightly, like he wanted to object but couldn't. I stood on legs that didn't feel stable. My phone was still under the table, and I didn't want to touch it again. I didn't want my skin on anything that could carry another message. As the suited men moved to escort me, a sound came from the wall display. Not a beep, not an electrical spark, a faint scrape, like a fingernail on glass. Everyone froze. The scrape came again, slow and deliberate, tracing a line. The dark surface of the powered-down display remained black, but something was moving across it, barely visible, a shifting sheen, like oil on water. Sato whispered, "It's still writing." Director Havel stepped forward, then stopped, as if the air itself had become a boundary she couldn't cross. The sheen on the black glass resolved into thin, pale lines, etched without light, visible only because they caught the room's dimming fluorescence at the right angle. A symbol formed, not English, not numbers, geometry. It was the same syntax as the scars on Mirror Earth, only smaller, compressed, adapted to fit the surface we'd given it. The suited men backed away in unison. I didn't. I couldn't. My body locked, a prey response, brain screaming at limbs to do something and receiving nothing in return. The symbol completed, and beneath it a line of English appeared as if translated by our own systems, though the power was cut. "You are trying to go dark." Director Havel's jaw tightened. "Move," she ordered, and this time it wasn't an instruction. It was a command pressed into the air like a boot into mud. We moved. The door opened, and the hallway outside was dimmer than before. Emergency lighting now, thin strips along the floor and ceiling, casting everything in a sick submarine glow. The Helios Array facility felt less like a research center and more like a bunker built to outlast a war no one could describe. The security guards led, followed by one suited man, then Director Havel, then me, then Sato, and the second suited man. We walked fast, our footsteps muted by rubber flooring. As we rounded the first corner, every wall monitor in the corridor flickered. They should have been off. They weren't. Each one lit with the same black field and pale geometry, the same symbol repeating like an infection spreading across surfaces. "Don't look at them," Sato hissed, but it was too late. Peripheral vision counts. Awareness counts. Meaning doesn't require direct eye contact. A new line of English appeared on one of the monitors as we passed. "Unseen is not invisible." I felt my stomach drop. "What does that mean?" I whispered. Director Havel didn't answer. She increased her pace. We passed a lab with its door sealed shut, red emergency light blinking above it. Through a narrow window in the door, I saw technicians inside, faces pale, staring at dead screens like mourners. As we moved deeper into the facility, the air grew colder, and the corridors became narrower. No signage, no friendly labels, just steel doors with numeric codes and biometric locks. Containment wing. The word echoed in my mind. I realized, with a sudden clarity, that containment wasn't for whatever was out there. Containment was for us, to keep us from spreading observation, to keep our minds from becoming instruments. At the end of Corridor 11, Director Havel stopped at a sealed door. She placed her palm on the panel. A scanner read her skin, her pulse, her temperature. The panel flashed green. The door unsealed with a hiss. Beyond it was a small antechamber, then another door. This one was thicker. The kind of door you'd put between yourself and something you didn't want to hear. Havel turned to me. "Inside," she said. I hesitated. "You're locking me in?" "Yes," she replied. "That's insane." Her eyes held mine. "Dr. Cade, insanity is believing you can negotiate with a mirror." Sato stepped closer, voice low, urgent. "Elias," he said, and it was the first time anyone had used my name in this room without it feeling like a threat. "You need to understand. If it's anchoring to you, your proximity to others increases the risk of propagation. Minds influence minds. Attention spreads." I stared at him. "So you're quarantining my thoughts?" He didn't deny it. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stepped into the antechamber, because what else was there to do? Fight armed men? Run through a facility designed to lock down? The second door opened, and I entered a small room that looked like a cross between a medical observation cell and an interrogation chamber. A bed bolted to the floor, a steel chair, a sink. No mirrors, no screens, no windows. The lighting was soft and indirect, as if they understood how reflections could become hazards. Director Havel remained outside. "This is a non-reflective environment," she said. "No glass, no polished metal, no external signal. You will remain here until we assess whether the anchoring can be severed." "And if it can't?" I asked. Havel's expression didn't change. "Then we will reassess what here means." My throat tightened. "You mean you'll kill me?" She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She simply said, "Do not attempt to communicate. Do not attempt to interpret any patterns you may see. If you experience visual hallucinations or intrusive thoughts, report them immediately." I laughed once, sharp and ugly. Intrusive thoughts. The second suited man pressed a button. The inner door began to close. As it sealed, I heard Director Havel's voice one last time, muffled through the thick barrier. "Elias," she said, and for a heartbeat she sounded almost human. "If you see it, don't name it." The door locked with a heavy, final sound. I was alone. At first, the quiet felt like relief. No monitors, no etched words, no hum of electronics trying to translate an impossible presence. Then I realized something. The quiet wasn't empty. It was attentive. I sat on the edge of the bolted bed and forced myself to breathe slowly. I tried to focus on mundane details. The texture of the mattress fabric, the faint smell of disinfectant, the steady temperature of the air. I thought about nothing, or tried to. But the human mind isn't built for blankness. Blankness invites pattern. Pattern invites meaning. And meaning, apparently, was the very thing trying to reach me. Minutes passed, maybe 20, maybe an hour. Time in sealed rooms becomes a suggestion rather than a measure. Then the first anomaly happened. Not on a screen, not on glass, on the wall. The paint, matte, off-white, shifted in one small spot near the corner. A subtle darkening, like a bruise blooming beneath skin. It wasn't large. It was barely the size of my palm. But it moved with intent, spreading along a line that wasn't random. I stood up so fast the bed frame creaked against its bolts. "No," I whispered. The dark line continued. It wasn't scratching the wall. It wasn't burning it. It was simply appearing, as if the wall itself had decided to remember a shape. I backed away until my shoulders hit the opposite wall. The line turned, made an angle, then another. A geometric path assembling itself out of discoloration, like someone drawing with shadow. I squeezed my eyes shut. Don't look. Don't name it. But the darkness continued even behind my eyelids. I could still sense it. The way you sense someone staring at you from behind. I opened my eyes. The symbol was almost complete. And beneath it, on the matte paint, English letters began to form. Not etched, not scratched, but rendered in subtle shifts of pigment, like bruises spelling words. "You are in a room without mirrors." My mouth went dry. My voice came out thin. "Yes." The moment the word left my lips, I regretted it. Director Havel had told me not to communicate, not to respond, not to feed it. But the response felt automatic, like a reflex. Like the system had already learned how to pull answers out of me. The wall darkened further. "Do you think that stops me?" I stared at the sentence. My heart hammered. "You're not real," I whispered, and immediately hated myself for saying anything at all. The bruised letters shifted. "Real is a measurement." I felt a cold sweat break across my back. The wall continued. "You measured me first." My mind flashed back to the anomaly, the silhouette, the earth mass. The moment I forced the blurred into sharpness, I swallowed hard. I measured mirror earth. The wall's letters rippled slightly, as if amused. "Mirror earth measured you." I backed up until I hit the sink, metal cold against my hip. I looked around desperately for something reflective to cover, to break, to destroy, then remembered there wasn't anything reflective in here. They'd built the room for this, and still, it was here. The bruised letters formed again, slower now, deliberate. You want to be unseen. I didn't answer. The wall darkened, as if my silence were a stimulus too. Unseen is not invisible. The same phrase from the corridor monitor. My throat tightened. What's the difference? I whispered before I could stop myself. The wall responded, immediately, like it had been waiting for that exact question. Unseen means unnamed. My breath caught. The implication was simple and horrifying. It didn't matter if you cut the power, if you turned off the telescopes, if you buried the data. If you could still describe it, you were still in contact. The bruised letters continued, and I felt something in my chest tighten into a shape I didn't recognize. Your species names everything. The sentence lingered. Then the wall added one more line. That is why you lose. I slid down the wall onto the floor, knees drawn up, trying to make myself small, trying to become less measurable. I thought of Mirror Earth's final message. Unseen. I thought of Director Harvell's last instruction. If you see it, don't name it. And in the dim, quiet room, as the bruised symbol hovered on the wall like a thought made visible, I realized the problem wasn't technology. The problem was being human. Because being human meant I could not stop my mind from forming the word that was already rising in me like a scream. A name. I stayed on the floor longer than I should have. Not because I was trying to be dramatic. Not because I was waiting for rescue. I stayed because every time I tried to stand, I felt the same invisible pressure push down on my thoughts, like the act of rising might count as an admission that I was still participating in the world. The bruised symbol on the wall didn't move. It didn't need to. It sat there in the corner like a concept made physical, a reminder that the room wasn't empty and never had been. I kept my eyes on the floor tiles instead, tracing their seams, counting them, anything to keep my brain from doing what it does best. Naming. Humans name storms to make them less chaotic. We name diseases to make them less personal. We name stars we'll never touch so we can pretend we own the sky. We put labels on the unknown the way children put blankets over their heads, believing fabric can stop a monster. But the wall had told me something Mirror Earth's last transmission had implied in a different way. Unseen means unnamed. My species had made a religion out of the opposite. After what felt like hours, I heard the faint mechanical click of the door mechanism cycling. A subtle shift in air pressure. Someone outside. A voice came through the speaker mounted high in the corner. Small, flush with the wall, matte black. Dr. Sato. Elias, he said, careful. Can you hear me? My throat worked before sound came out. Yes. A pause. Are you alone in the room? I almost laughed. The question was ridiculous and also the most important question anyone could ask. I didn't look at the corner. I didn't look at the bruised symbol. I stared at the floor and answered, I'm alone. Another pause, longer. Then Sato said, do you see any patterns on the walls? My chest tightened. Director Havel's instruction flashed in my mind. If you experience visual hallucinations or intrusive thoughts, report them immediately. But the moment I described it, I would be doing exactly what the thing wanted. I would be naming. So I said, no. Silence followed, heavy and suspicious. Sato's voice returned, softer. Elias, the internal sensors in your room are showing fluctuations in reflectivity. That shouldn't happen. The walls are matte. I closed my eyes. So it wasn't just me. It wasn't a hallucination. It was measurable. Elias, Sato said again, I need you to stay calm. We're attempting to lower your cognitive load. I frowned. My what? Cognitive load, he repeated, like it was a medical term. Attention, pattern recognition, the processes that create high-resolution models. We believe the anchoring strengthens when you interpret. My mouth tasted like copper. So you're trying to make me stupid. Sato hesitated, temporarily less defining. A laugh bubbled up and died in my chest. You can't sedate a species trait. We can. Try, he said. There was a faint hiss from a vent near the ceiling. I looked up instinctively, then forced my gaze away from the wall corner. The vent released a thin mist, barely visible, smelling faintly of antiseptic and something floral that felt wrong in a place like this. A tranquilizer, or an attempt at one. I felt my limbs begin to loosen within minutes, my muscles turning heavy, my thoughts slower, as if someone had poured syrup into my skull. Relief came with it, terrible relief, because the effort of resisting my own mind had been exhausting. The drug made the fight feel distant, optional. But the bruised symbol remained, and the wall still watched. The speaker crackled again. Now it was Director Havel. "Dr. Cade," she said. "Listen carefully. Do not speak unless necessary. Do not respond to any stimuli that appear in the room. We are going to attempt severance." My tongue felt thick. How? Havel's voice stayed steady. "We are reducing the informational coherence between you and Mirror Earth. This will involve inducing a temporary amnestic state." My eyes narrowed sluggishly. "You're erasing my memory." "We're suppressing access pathways," she corrected. "If you cannot hold the model in your mind, you cannot act as an anchor." The wall, as if offended by being discussed, darkened slightly. Letters began to bloom beneath the symbol. I didn't want to look. I looked anyway. "They are trying to make you forget." My stomach twisted. The drug made it feel distant, like nausea behind glass, but it was still there. Havel's voice tightened. "Do not look at it." I forced my gaze to the floor again, but the wall had already placed the sentence in my mind. Even without looking, I could remember it. Words are sticky. Once read, they cling. The speaker crackled, as if someone adjusted a dial. Then Sato's voice returned, strained. "Director, the coherence graph is not dropping." Havel snapped, "Increase the dosage." Another hiss, more mist. My thoughts slowed further. I felt my sense of self loosen around the edges. Names of things became harder to hold. The facility's smell, the room's angles, the idea of Mirror Earth. Everything began to blur the way dreams blur when you wake. For a moment, hope flickered. If my mind couldn't define, maybe the door would close. Then the wall spoke again, louder in the sense that it occupied more of my attention, even without sound. New bruised letters formed. "Forgetting does not unname." My breath caught. It was right, in a way that made my skin crawl. Even if I forgot, the model existed somewhere now. In files, in other minds, in the system, in the universe's memory of being observed. A new line appeared beneath that, and this time, I didn't even pretend I wasn't reading it. "You opened the door." I felt something cold settle behind my eyes. Havel's voice came sharp through the speaker. "Cade, look at me." There was no camera, no window, no way to look at her. "I can't," I whispered. "Then listen," she said, and her control finally cracked, revealing urgency. "We're going to ask you to do something difficult. You must not complete the thought." My brow furrowed. "What thought?" Sato's voice came in, overlapping. "Elias, your mind is approaching a closure event, a semantic collapse. You're trying to assign a stable label to the entity." The drug made everything floaty, but the fear cut through it clean. I began. "Stop," Havel snapped. "Do not say it." I swallowed hard. The name was there, on the edge of consciousness, formed by my pattern-hungry brain. I didn't even know where it came from. Not a sound, not a proper noun I'd heard. It was like the universe itself had suggested a word into my mouth. A word that fit the geometry. A word that felt like a handle. And handles are what you use to open things. The wall's bruised letters shifted. as if leaning closer. Name me. My heart hammered. I pressed my palms over my ears, as if that could stop my eyes from reading, as if it could stop my mind from forming the syllables anyway. Havel's voice was calmer now, dangerously calm. Elias, the moment you name it, you confirm it. You provide it with stable semantic structure. You make it easy to locate itself in our reality. I squeezed my eyes shut. I'm trying. The wall continued, patient. You have already named me. My lips trembled. No. You used a word, the wall replied, when you saw my mark. I froze. A memory surfaced through the drug haze. Mirror Earth scar, the jagged line. Me staring at it and thinking, it looks like writing, not just damage. Writing. Then another memory, earlier. The black display, my reflection tilting its head when I hadn't, and my mind shouting a word I never said aloud. Predator. Not a name, not a title, but a category. The wall wasn't asking for a personal name. It was asking for the final classification that would lock it into a comprehensible shape. A single word that would define how we relate to it. Once you define a relationship, you build a bridge. The speaker hissed again. More mist. I felt my mind slipping, words dissolving, identity fraying like wet paper. Havel's voice returned, almost pleading now. Elias, hold on to one thing. Hold on to your own name. Don't let it rewrite you. The wall responded immediately, as if it had been waiting for that vulnerability. Elias is only a label. My eyes snapped open. The bruised letters on the wall were darker now, deeper, as if the room itself were bruising from the pressure of holding meaning. Then something happened that had nothing to do with words. The air in front of me thickened, not mist, not gas, density, like an invisible pane sliding into place, separating one half of the room from the other. My skin prickled as if charged. My hair lifted slightly on my arms. The wall's symbol brightened in contrast, the bruised lines sharpening into something crisp. Sato's voice came faintly through the speaker, panicked now. Director, the coherence just spiked. Havel cut him off. Cade, don't. But I barely heard her because the room did the one thing I hadn't expected. It reflected, not with mirrors, not with glass, with reality itself. The space in front of me folded like a sheet being pulled tight, and in that fold I saw something that was not a creature and not a machine. It was geometry that carried intention. It didn't have eyes, and yet it was looking. It didn't have a mouth, and yet it was speaking by existing. And in my mind, the word finally assembled itself completely. It fit too well. It felt inevitable. I tried to swallow it back, tried to bite it off before it could be born into sound. But the drug had made my control slow, and my fear made my brain greedy. I whispered the first syllable before I could stop myself. The room reacted instantly. The folded space shivered, as if the universe had been waiting for that exact phonetic key. The wall's bruised letters vanished. In their place, new text appeared, clean and bright. Thank you. The speaker exploded with static. Havel's voice shouted my name, but it was too late. The fold in the air widened like an opening eye, and through it I saw a sliver of mirror Earth, not the planet, but the space around it. A dark region filled with faint moving structures like nets drifting through nothingness, something vast and patient, suspended between worlds. Then the fold snapped shut. The room went normal again, abruptly, cruelly. I sat there on the floor, shaking, the drug haze thinning just enough for the horror to settle fully into my bones. My phone, still under the table, out in the hallway somewhere. I didn't know, didn't matter. No screens mattered, because the worst part wasn't that it spoke to me. The worst part was that I spoke back, and in doing so, I gave it what it wanted. A key, a name. The door didn't open right away. That was the first mercy. For a while after the fold snapped shut, I was alone with my breathing and the lingering sense that the air had been touched. The tranquilizer haze was thinning, but not fast enough to make me sharp, just fast enough to make regret clear. I had said the first syllable. I couldn't even remember the whole word now. Not precisely. The moment it left my mouth, it felt like it slid out of language and into something deeper, like a key sinking into a lock. My memory didn't hold it the way memory holds normal speech. It held it the way skin holds a bruise, a shape without edges, a meaning without a name. And yet I knew what I had done. I had completed a closure event. I had given the system what it needed to stabilize. I'd answered. That was when the speaker in the corner crackled again, weak and distorted. Sato's voice came through like it was traveling through water. "Elias, do you hear me?" I swallowed. My throat was raw. "Yes." A pause. I heard muffled voices behind him, urgent, overlapping, then the sound of someone moving away from a microphone. "You spoke," Sato said finally. It wasn't a question. I closed my eyes. "I think so." "Did you say the name?" he asked. My stomach twisted. "I don't remember the whole word." Another pause, longer and worse. "You don't need to remember," he said quietly. "It remembers." My skin prickled. Havel's voice cut in, sharper, closer to the mic. "Cade, describe what you saw." I almost laughed. They had told me not to name it, not to interpret, not to feed it. And now they wanted a description. "I can't," I said. "You will," Havel replied. "Because if Phase 5 is active, we need to know whether the interface has progressed to manifestation." I felt my hands curl into fists. "Manifestation, like a ghost." "Like a foothold," she corrected. "Talk." My mouth went dry. The wrong part of my brain wanted to comply. The part trained by meetings and reports and authority. The part that believed information was safety. But the bruised words on the wall had already taught me the trap. Unseen means unnamed. To describe was to define. To define was to anchor. I breathed slowly. "It wasn't a creature," I said carefully. "It was geometry, a fold, like space became a surface." Silence. Then Sato, softer. "Did you see Mirror Earth through it?" "Yes," I admitted. "What did you see?" Havel demanded. I stared at the matte floor. "Not the planet, the space around it." "Be specific," she said. I hesitated too long. I felt the room tighten, like the air itself listened for my choice. I forced the words out anyway, hating each one. "It looked like nets, structures, thin, moving patterns, like something huge suspended between worlds." The speaker hissed. Sato whispered, "That matches the archived imagery." Havel's voice sharpened further. "So it's progressed beyond reciprocity." I swallowed. "What does that mean?" "It means it can render a projection," she said. "A partial overlap, a controlled bleed." I felt cold. "Into our room." "Into you," Sato murmured. I opened my eyes. "What?" He didn't answer at first. I heard him inhale. "Elias," he said, "your neural activity spiked at the moment you spoke. The coherence graph surged. We're seeing persistent resonance centered on your biometric signature." I stared at the wall corner where the bruised symbol had been. The paint was normal again, as if it had never happened. But I didn't trust normal anymore. "You're saying it's attached to me," I whispered. Havel answered bluntly. "We are saying you may now be a carrier state." My pulse hammered. "I'm not sick," I snapped. Sato's voice was tired. "Not biological." I tried to stand, but my legs wobbled. The drug had left weakness behind, like a hangover made of lead. I steadied myself against the sink. "What happens to carriers?" I asked. Silence. That was answer enough. Havel spoke again, controlled now, colder. "We're moving to secondary containment. You will be escorted. Do not speak to anyone. Do not look at reflective surfaces. Do not attempt to write down anything you remember." My mouth tightened. "You're afraid I'll spread it?" "Yes," she said. "Through description, through language, through thought. I laughed once, hollow. So what do you want from me? To stop thinking? Sato's voice dropped. We want you to stop recognizing. The lock cycled, the inner door unsealed with a heavy clunk. It opened a few inches, enough to show the antechamber, and beyond that, silhouettes. 2 security guards in matte black helmets and face shields. Not to protect them from me, to protect them from seeing my face too clearly, I realized, and the thought made my skin crawl. Behind them, Director Havel and Sato stood at a safe distance. Havel's posture was hard, but Sato looked like he'd aged 10 years since the briefing room. Hands visible, Havel said. I lifted them. The guards stepped in with controlled precision. One held a device like a handheld scanner, but it wasn't pointed at my body the way a medical scanner would be. It was aimed at the space around my head, like they were measuring the air. The scanner made no sound. Its screen displayed a moving pattern of lines that I didn't want to interpret. We're taking you to a null wing, Sato said softly. Minimal stimuli, no windows, no external references. Is that supposed to help? I asked. It's supposed to limit reinforcement, he said. The guards guided me out into the corridor. The facility was darker now, emergency lighting only. Many doors were sealed. The air smelled recycled, and beneath it was a sharp ozone tang, the scent of systems, dying. As we moved, I noticed something new. It wasn't on monitors, because the monitors were off. It wasn't on glass, because there was little glass. It was in the way the shadows fell. Every corner we passed seemed to have a slightly different geometry than it should. Angles too sharp, lines too clean, like the world was being simplified. Low-resolution reality. I remembered the phrase from the wall. Real is a measurement. What if the opposite was also true? If reality could be measured into clarity, it could also be measured into blur. As we approached a junction, one of the guards paused. The scanner in his hand flickered. He tilted it toward the ceiling. Sato swore under his breath. What? I asked. Havel's voice was tight. Keep moving. But I couldn't help it. My eyes followed the guard's line of sight. Above us, where the emergency light strip ran along the ceiling, something was wrong. The light didn't just illuminate the corridor. It cast a faint pattern into the air itself, like dust motes aligning into a shape. Not dust. Something else. A faint, shifting lattice, barely visible, like a net drifting through smoke. The same thing I'd seen through the fold. My stomach dropped. It's here, Havel snapped, eyes forward. But it was too late. The moment I recognized the lattice, it sharpened. It moved, not like a creature moves, like a calculation updating. The guard's scanner went dead. His posture stiffened. Then, in the dim air above us, a faint line appeared, as if written by absence rather than ink. A sentence formed without letters, readable only because my brain insisted on reading it. Not on a surface, in space. You brought it with you. My breath caught. I wanted to deny it, but denial is still recognition. Sato's voice came low, urgent. Elias, don't... The lattice thickened. The corridor felt smaller, not physically, but conceptually, like the walls had moved closer in the map of reality. The emergency lights dimmed by another fraction. One of the guards took a step back, and his boot scraped the floor. The sound echoed too long. Then the echo repeated but delayed, as if the corridor had decided to mimic the noise. Scrape, scrape, scrape. 3 times. And on the third, I realized the repetition wasn't acoustics. It was response. The facility was behaving like a system being probed. Havel drew a compact weapon from her belt. Matte black, no visible muzzle, more like a tool than a gun. What is that? I whispered. A last resort, she said. Sato looked at her sharply. Director, Havel didn't look at him. We are not letting it propagate. My blood ran cold. Propagate how? Havel's eyes flicked to me. Through the anchor. I stumbled backward. The guard tightened his grip on my arm. "No," I said. "You said you were taking me to a null wing." Havel's voice was ice. "Plans change." The lattice above us shifted again, and for a heartbeat, the corridor's ceiling looked like it was folding inward, not physically collapsing, but aligning into the same impossible geometry I'd seen in the room. Sato stepped forward, voice pleading now. "Director, if you eliminate him now, you may spike coherence. A violent severance could," Havel snapped, "or it could stop this." The sentence in the air changed, rearranging itself with a calmness that made my skin crawl. "You think you can cut the thread." The lattice thickened. "Threads are for weaving." Havel raised her weapon. Sato grabbed her wrist. "Stop." For a moment, the only sound was our breathing and the faint hum of dying systems. Then the lattice moved again, faster now, like it had grown impatient with our debate. A fold began to form at the far end of the corridor, subtle at first, then more pronounced. The air bent. The emergency light reflected strangely, even on matte surfaces. The guards froze. Havel's weapon remained raised, but her expression shifted for the first time into something I hadn't seen in her before. Recognition. Fear. Because the fold wasn't forming around me. It was forming ahead of us, as if it didn't need the anchor anymore, as if it had learned how to open itself. The fold widened, and in the thin gap of impossible space, something waited. Something not shaped like a body, but shaped like intent. And I understood, with a sinking certainty, what Mirror Earth had meant. They didn't come from space. They came from your certainty. We had just proven ours. Director Havel's weapon was still raised when the corridor began to fold. For one irrational second, I expected a physical disaster. Pipes bursting, ceiling panels falling, power surging back in a violent arc. The human brain prefers mechanical explanations. It prefers problems you can touch. This wasn't touchable. The air at the far end of the corridor behaved like a thought changing its mind. The straight lines of the hallway seemed to hesitate, then subtly realign, as if geometry itself were being edited by an unseen hand. Emergency light spilled into the fold and came back wrong, too smooth, too clean, like it had been filtered through a different set of rules before returning. The lattice above us thickened, strands becoming more visible as the fold widened. It was the same pattern I'd glimpsed through the interface in my containment room, only now it wasn't a glimpse. It was present. Sato's fingers were still wrapped around Havel's wrist, holding the weapon down by millimeters. He looked at her like he was trying to stop a gunshot and a catastrophe at the same time. "Director," he said, voice tight. "If you fire..." "I'm not aiming at the fold," she snapped, eyes locked forward. She was aiming at me. I felt the guard's grip tighten on my arm, but it wasn't protective. It was restraining, keeping me from moving, from running, from doing anything that might change the equation Havel was now solving in her head. Havel's jaw clenched. "He's the anchor." Sato's eyes flicked to me, then back to the fold. He was. The difference between is and was made my stomach drop. The fold widened again, and the corridor's far end no longer looked like a place you could walk into. It looked like a cut in a photograph, an opening into a depth the hallway hadn't contained a second earlier. Inside that cut, there was no starlight, no stars at all. Just a dark field filled with faint, drifting structures, nets, lattices, filament-like arcs moving with slow patience. Not floating the way objects float in air, but adjusting, recalculating, as if they were expressions of a living equation. My mouth went dry. "That's them." No one answered, because the truth in that statement was heavier than any reply. Then something shifted within the fold. Not a creature stepping forward, not a ship approaching, a change in emphasis. Like the dark field had turned its attention from space to here. A sentence formed in the air between us and the fold. Not on a surface, not etched into a screen. It wasn't even letters at first. just a subtle modulation of shadow and light that my brain insisted on reading. We do not arrive. The words felt less like communication and more like correction, like my assumptions had been placed on a table and dissected. A second line formed beneath the first. You align. Havel's eyes widened a fraction. Her weapon trembled. Sato whispered, "It's not crossing distance." The blank lapel man, whose calm had held so far, finally sounded shaken. "It's overwriting the boundary." The guards didn't move. I realized then they were trained not to. Trained to become furniture in moments like this, because furniture doesn't contribute meaning. But I couldn't do that. My mind kept trying to interpret, to categorize, to name. It was a reflex as deep as breathing, and it was killing us. The fold pulsed once, subtle, like a heartbeat. The lattice above us responded, tightening, becoming more coherent. The corridor itself felt like it was being dragged toward that coherence, as if the building were being persuaded to become part of the same structure. Havel's weapon rose again. Sato tightened his grip. "Director, stop!" Havel's voice was ice. "If he's not the anchor, then what is?" Sato swallowed. His answer came out low and awful. "The building!" I felt my blood drain from my face. Havel stared at him. "Explain." Sato's eyes were on the fold. Our systems mapped it. Our containment measures referenced it. Our sensors translated it. We built a semantic framework inside this facility that now exists as a stable model. He swallowed again. We created a local copy. The phrase hit me like a punch. A local copy of what? A species? A method? A door? The fold widened another fraction, and the corridor lights dimmed in response. Not because power was failing, because reality was reallocating. The sentence in the air changed. You build shrines out of warnings. I shuddered. Havel took a step forward, and Sato let go of her wrist, realizing force wouldn't matter much longer. The guards tensed. Havel's voice hardened into command. All personnel, fall back to junction point, seal corridor 11. The guards moved at last, guiding me backward. We retreated in measured steps, never turning our backs on the fold. The corridor behind us felt longer than it had before, like the map was stretching while we moved through it. The fold didn't chase. It didn't need to. As we backed away, I saw the lattice above us extend, fine strands reaching along the ceiling like roots seeking soil. Wherever the strands passed, the corridor's edges sharpened unnaturally. The world became cleaner, simpler, more algorithmic. A thought surfaced, cold and clear. It was rendering, not attacking, rendering, turning our messy, human space into something it could occupy without discomfort. We reached the junction point. A heavy blast door stood there, normally used to isolate sections of the facility in case of fire or decompression. One of the suited men slapped a panel. The door began to close with a deep mechanical groan. As it slid inward, the fold remained visible down the corridor like an open eye at the end of a tunnel. And in that final narrowing view, the dark field inside the fold shifted again. Less abstract, now more deliberate. For a brief, sick moment, the lattices aligned into a shape that resembled an architecture rather than a net, a threshold, a frame, and within it, a suggestion of something like a silhouette, not a body, not a face, but a boundary where a body could be implied. My stomach turned over. The blast door sealed shut with a thunderous finality. For a second there was silence. Then the door vibrated, not from impact, from resonance. The metal hummed like a tuning fork, a low frequency that traveled up through my bones and into my teeth. The guards stiffened. Havel raised her weapon again, though what she planned to shoot through 8 inches of reinforced steel was beyond me. Sato pressed his palm to the door as if he could feel the other side through it. His face was pale. "It's not trying to break in," he whispered. Havel snapped. "Then what is it doing?" Sato's eyes met mine. and I saw real fear there for the first time, fear without control. "It's calibrating," he said. The hum shifted pitch. The blast door's surface rippled faintly, not physically deforming, but seeming to fluctuate in reflectivity. As if the material itself was being asked a question it didn't have the vocabulary to answer. A line appeared on the steel, not scratched, not engraved. A subtle darkening, like bruising, blooming across the metal in the shape of the same symbol from my containment room. The guards stepped back instinctively. Havel's weapon tracked the symbol like it was a target. Then English letters formed beneath it. "You think doors are one way?" Sato's voice came out hoarse. "Don't respond." I didn't. I couldn't have if I wanted to. My throat felt locked. The letters continued, writing themselves slowly, as if savoring the inevitability of being understood. "You cut light. You cut signal. You cut space." The hum deepened. The symbol on the door sharpened, its lines darker, more certain. Then the final line appeared, and the room seemed to go colder as it formed. "You did not cut me." My knees went weak, and the guard's grip tightened again. Havel's voice was low, almost to herself. "Then we cut the anchor." Sato snapped his head toward her. "No." Havel's eyes were hard. "It's already manifesting on steel, Sato. It's already rendering through non-reflective surfaces. The only variable left is him." She nodded toward me. Sato stepped in front of her, blocking her line of sight. "If you kill him now, you may not sever anything. You may simply give it a new definition for death, for violence, for consequence." Havel's jaw clenched. "So what do you propose?" Sato's voice trembled, but he forced it steady. "We do what Mirror Earth failed to do." Havel stared. "Go unseen." Sato nodded. "But properly, not by turning off machines, by starving meaning." The blank lapel man laughed once, bitter. "How do you starve meaning in a human brain?" Sato looked at me. "We sever the narrative," he said softly. "We erase the model everywhere it exists." My stomach dropped. "You can't. I already saw it." Sato's eyes held mine with grim apology. "Then we start with you." The room tilted. "You said killing me might spike coherence." "I didn't say kill," he whispered. Havel's expression sharpened. "Amnestic protocol won't be enough." Sato nodded once, slow, as if conceding something painful. "No," he said. "Not amnestic, not sedation." He inhaled. "Identity collapse." The phrase made my blood run cold. "What does that mean?" I whispered. Sato didn't answer me right away, because the blast door hummed again and the symbol on it shifted. For the first time, it wasn't writing at us. It was writing through the metal, as if the door had become paper. The steel darkened along its seam, the exact line where it met the floor. The seam began to glow faintly, not with heat, but with a strange clarity, as if the boundary had been highlighted by a highlighter made of physics. The door wasn't being forced open. The concept of closed was being edited. Havel raised her weapon and took aim at the seam. Sato grabbed her arm again, desperate. "Stop, you'll only—" The seam widened by a millimeter. Air moved through it, cold and dry, smelling faintly of ozone and something older, like dust that had never belonged to Earth. I felt my skin crawl as the air touched my face. The fold was coming through, not by breaking the door, by redefining it. And the worst part was this. The moment I recognized what was happening, the seam widened another fraction, as if my understanding were oil on the gears. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to stop my mind from participating, but I could still feel the cold air, still smell it, still know. We were past mirrors now. We were past screens. The blind spot had opened, and something on the other side was learning how to wear our world. The seam under the blast door widened another millimeter. Not from pressure, not from force, from permission. That was the worst realization of the night. Nothing here was being overpowered. We were being reframed. The building wasn't failing. The concept of barrier was being negotiated into irrelevance. And the negotiation was happening in a language older than physics, spoken fluently by something that didn't need to breathe. Cold air seeped through the line at the floor, carrying the same dry ozone sting I'd smelled in my containment room. It slid into my lungs and felt wrong there, like inhaling a rule I wasn't built to obey. Havel's weapon remained trained on the seam. Sato's hand was clamped around her wrist, hard enough to whiten his knuckles. His face looked hollow in the emergency lighting, like he'd been carved down to obligation. "Director," he said through his teeth, "you fire into that seam and you validate it. You'll give it a new data point, a new behavior, cause and effect, injury, response." Havel's voice came out low and furious. "And if we do nothing, we die." Sato didn't argue the dying part. He just said, "Then we die quietly." The blank lapel man stared at the widening line and whispered, "It's not coming through as an invader. It's coming through as interpretation." The guards shifted, anxious, as if their bodies still believed there was something they could do. One of them lifted his scanner again, then stopped when the device remained dead. He looked down at it like it had betrayed him. The seam widened again, and the blast door's entire surface took on that faint, bruised shimmer. A shadow pattern crawled across the steel, not forming words this time, just tightening the symbol syntax we'd seen again and again. It felt like watching a hand learn your handwriting. Havel's gaze snapped to me. "Get him out," she ordered. The guard's grip on my arm became a shove. My feet stumbled over themselves as they pulled me back down the junction corridor, away from the door and the cold air and the impossible seam. Sato moved with us, eyes never leaving the blast door. "Where are you taking me?" I demanded. Havel followed a step behind, weapon still raised, like she was afraid to turn her back on any surface. "Null wing," she said. "You already said that," I snapped, "and you also implied you might shoot me." Her eyes didn't flicker. "You're still alive. That's not comforting." Sato's voice was strained, but steady. "Elias, you need to understand what's happening. The door is no longer the primary interface. It's a symptom. The overlap is propagating through our definitions. Through language," I said bitterly. "Through identity," he corrected. The corridor lights flickered as if responding to his word. A tiny stutter in illumination that shouldn't have meant anything, except now everything meant too much. We reached another blast door, smaller, set into a cross corridor. Havel palm-printed it open. Inside was a cramped control room with matte surfaces and foam-lined walls, built to dampen sound and reflection. A single console sat in the center. Not glass, not polished, just a dull slab with tactile switches and a paper readout printer that looked like it belonged in the 70s. Old tech. Analog where possible. A desperate attempt to live in a lower resolution. Havel slammed the door behind us and turned. "Identity collapse," she said, looking at Sato. "Explain it to him." Sato swallowed. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw a weary apology. "It's exactly what it sounds like," he said softly. "Not sedation, not amnesia, a dismantling of the anchor point. If it's attached to Elias Cade as a coherent node, your history, your memories, your pattern making, then we make that node incoherent." I stared at him, the words slow to settle. "You're going to erase me." Sato shook his head once. "Not kill, not erase, fragment." Havel cut in, voice blunt. "He will survive as a human organism, but the narrative continuity, his stable self, will be disrupted. He'll be less definable, less addressable." I felt my throat tighten. "You're turning me into noise." Sato nodded, pained. "Yes." The blank lapel man stepped closer, eyes cold. "We've done it before." I turned to him. "To who?" He didn't answer directly. "There are people who see too much and become liabilities. There are methods to remove what they saw without simply killing them. Killing creates martyrs. Stories. Stories spread. Havel gestured toward the dull console. This unit triggers the protocol. It uses a targeted electromagnetic disruption pattern. It's crude, but crude is what we need. High-resolution tools are the enemy. My legs felt weak. I backed toward the foam-lined wall. You can't just do that, I said, voice rising. You can't rip apart a person because your science failed. Havel's expression didn't change. Our science didn't fail, she said. It succeeded. That's the problem. The facility trembled faintly. Not a quake, not an explosion. A resonance, like the building was humming with a frequency you couldn't hear but could feel in your bones. Sato's eyes widened. The seam. Havel turned sharply toward the door, as if she could see through it. Another tremor. Then a sound I will never forget. A soft, dry scrape, like something sliding across foam, inside our control room. We all froze. There were no vents open, no windows, no entry points besides the sealed door. The scrape came again, closer. The foam wall beside me darkened in a thin line, like a bruise blooming. It traced a curve, then an angle, a symbol forming, patiently, with the confidence of something that knew it had time. Havel lifted her weapon and aimed at the wall. Sato grabbed her arm. "Don't!" "It's already here," she hissed. Sato's voice cracked. "Then we're out of doors." The bruised symbol completed itself. Beneath it, letters formed, subtle changes in foam texture that my brain insisted on reading. "You want to break him." Havel's jaw clenched. The foam letters continued. "You think that ends the story." My heart hammered. I couldn't stop looking. Even if I closed my eyes, I would still know it was there, and knowledge had become the weapon. Sato stepped between me and the wall, forcing my line of sight away. "Elias," he said urgently, "listen to me. The only way to slow this is to starve it of stable reference points." I laughed once, harsh. "By destroying me." "By severing your continuity," he said, and his eyes shone with something like grief. "I'm sorry." Havel moved to the console. Her fingers hovered over a large, tactile switch labeled Initiate. The foam wall wrote again, faster now, as if urgency had entered the system. "You are still human." A pause. "So try a human trick." I swallowed hard. "What does that mean?" The foam letters shifted. "Lie." The word hit me like a slap. Lie. Not to Havel, not to Sato, to the thing that was defining us. I stared at the bruised symbol, at the command embedded in it. It wasn't asking for honesty. It was asking for a change in narrative, a distortion, a break in the pattern. Humans lie instinctively. We lie to survive. We lie to predators. We lie to each other. We lie to ourselves. It's a terrible trait, and also, sometimes, the only tool we have. Sato's voice went thin. "Elias, don't engage." But the command had already landed in my mind, and the desperate part of me clung to it because it was something to do other than be dismantled. I stepped around Sato, eyes on the bruised letters. "If you want a human trick," I said aloud, forcing my voice steady, "then here it is." Havel whipped her head toward me. "Cade, stop." I didn't. The foam wall seemed to sharpen in response, the symbol lines darkening, the room's air tightening as if attention itself had become pressure. I spoke directly to it. "I never saw Mirror Earth," I said. "I never mapped it. I never named you." Sato's face went pale. "Elias," Havel's weapon snapped toward me. "Shut up." But I kept going because lying isn't one statement. It's a commitment. "You're not here," I said, louder now. "You're not observing us. There is no Phase 5. There is no fold. There is no seam. There is nothing on the other side." The foam letters rippled, as if uncertain, not offended, not angry, testing. "Denial is still meaning." I swallowed. "Then I'll change the meaning." My voice shook, but I forced it into steadiness. "You're not an ancient species," I said. "You're not an archivist. You're not a predator. You're not real. The bruise symbol wavered, subtle, like a model receiving conflicting input. Sato grabbed my arm, fierce. "Elias, you can't argue it out of existence." "Maybe not," I said, and my heart hammered with a wild, fragile hope. "But maybe I can break its certainty." Havel moved toward the console again. "Enough. Initiating collapse." The foam wall wrote rapidly now, lines forming and dissolving as if something were recalculating. "You are trying to..." The sentence stopped mid-formation. For the first time, it hesitated. The room's resonance shifted pitch. The facility tremor outside stuttered, like a machine missing a beat. I stared at the half-formed letters and understood something brutal and beautiful. It didn't like ambiguity. It thrived on definition. If it weaponized understanding, then confusion was poison. I leaned closer to the wall, ignoring Sato's grip, ignoring Havel's weapon, ignoring the terror screaming at me to shut up and survive. I whispered, carefully, with all the human ugliness I could summon. "I lied," I said. "I told you I never saw it. That was a lie." The foam letters wavered. I continued, voice low and trembling. "And this is true. I saw Mirror Earth. Humanity lost. You marked them. You're coming." The foam symbol sharpened again. Relief, almost. Then I smiled, because the trick wasn't in the lie. It was in the contradiction. I whispered the final human poison. And that is also a lie. The room went very still. The bruised symbol on the foam wall flickered, like it couldn't decide whether to exist. The letters blurred, reforming, then blurring again. The resonance in the building dropped, then rose, then dropped, as if the entire system had been fed a paradox it couldn't immediately resolve. Sato's eyes widened. "Director, wait." Havel's finger hesitated over the initiate switch. The foam wall tried to write again. It managed only 2 words before the texture smeared. "Define your..." Then the sentence collapsed into meaningless bruise streaks. For the first time all night, the thing didn't answer cleanly. It stuttered. It searched. And in that brief gap, seconds at most, I felt the pressure ease, like a hand loosening around my throat. Sato whispered, almost reverent, "It can't stabilize contradictory inputs." Havel's eyes locked on the wall, then on me. "Keep going," she said, voice low. "Keep it unstable." I stared at the smeared bruises, at the symbol trying to exist and failing, and I realized the final horror. This was the only weapon we had. Not missiles, not blackouts, not even silence. The weapon was ruining our own relationship with truth, becoming unreliable, becoming unmeasurable, becoming a species that could no longer be modeled. I spoke again softly, feeding it paradox like shards of glass. "I am Elias," I said. "I am not Elias." The foam bruises pulsed. "I named you," I whispered. "I never named you." The room's resonance shivered. Havel's finger hovered over the switch, waiting for Sato's nod. Sato whispered, "Now." Havel slammed the initiate switch down. A low thrum filled the control room. Not loud, but deep, vibrating through my bones. My vision blurred at the edges. I felt my thoughts pull apart, not as pain, but as distance. Memories sliding away from each other like magnets forced to repel. The foam wall's bruises flared once, then faded, as if the surface had lost the ability to hold the pattern. The pressure in the air dropped sharply. I gasped, not from lack of oxygen, but from sudden freedom. Sato's voice sounded far away. "Elias, stay with me." But the word Elias already felt like it belonged to someone else. I tried to hold on to it, tried to clutch it like a rope, and in the fading corner of my mind, I sensed something withdraw. Not defeated, not dead, just unanchored. The fold didn't vanish, it didn't stop existing. It simply couldn't find the thread as easily. As my identity began to fragment, one last thought surfaced, sharp as a blade. Mirror Earth didn't lose because it was weaker. It lost because it was seen. And if my people wanted to survive, we would have to become something that could not be cleanly observed, something that couldn't be understood without breaking. The last thing I remember clearly before the world dissolved into disconnected pieces was Director Havel's voice, close to my ear, whispering like a confession. "We're going dark the only way that matters," she said. "Inside." I don't remember when my name stopped feeling like mine. It wasn't sudden. There was no moment where I woke up and thought, I am gone. It happened the way erosion happens. Quiet, patient, unnoticed, until something essential is missing. They tell me my name is Elias Cade. I accept that the way I accept the sky is blue, as information, not as identity. I live in a facility that doesn't use screens, no mirrors, no polished surfaces. The walls are matte and softly lit, and the corners are deliberately imperfect, crooked on purpose. Engineers designed them that way after the blackout, after the reports, after the world quietly agreed to stop looking too closely at itself. I'm allowed outside sometimes. The sky looks normal. That's the unsettling part. No rifts, no ships, no signs of invasion. Satellites still orbit. Telescopes still exist, but they are blind by design now. We look at stars the way ancient people did, carefully, imprecisely, without trying to understand too much. Understanding became dangerous. They ask me questions during evaluations. Do you recognize this symbol? Do you feel watched? Do you remember Mirror Earth? I answer honestly. No. No. I'm not sure what that is. Those answers are mostly true. Sometimes though, usually at night, I feel a pressure behind my thoughts, like something testing the edges of me. Not pushing, just checking whether the shape is still there, whether the name still fits. That's when I do what they taught me. I lie. I tell myself I am whole. I tell myself nothing was lost. I tell myself humanity won. And then, in the same breath, I tell myself none of that is true. The contradiction feels like static in my head. It hurts a little. But the pressure eases afterward, like something backing away from an unstable surface. Director Havel retired last year. Dr. Sato vanished from public records entirely. Officially, the Helios array never found anything behind the sun. Officially, Mirror Earth never existed. Unofficially, the universe flinched. Sometimes I stand outside at dusk and watch the sky darken, and I wonder if something is still out there, waiting for us to become confident again, waiting for our stories to solidify, waiting for us to decide we finally understand. If that day comes, I hope I'm gone enough that I won't be useful, because I think I finally understand the lesson Mirror Earth died teaching us. The universe doesn't punish ignorance, it punishes certainty. And as long as I remain slightly unfinished, slightly untrue, I might still be doing my job, even if I can no longer remember why.